Yeah, I know this would not count as cosplay to any of the Dragoncon cosplayers. Just fanboyness.
Well, how has your Dragoncon been so far this year, Phil?
It's always great. I mean, there's no convention like this.
Yeah.
You know, and it's incredible. And thank you guys all for still being here.
Woo!
And probably mostly being sober.
Speaking of cosplay, do you have a favorite cosplay you've seen as you've been walking around the convention this weekend? A favorite cosplay you've seen?
Well, I'm old. So half the anime things I don't recognize. What is that? So go, it's from huh?
Great. Well, thank you for still being here with us on Monday. I'm going to ask you a couple of softball questions, and then we'll get to some questions from the audience. What was an unforgettable vacation you went on recently?
Well, I'm not a traveler.
Okay.
Although I did actually do my first unforgettable vacation. My daughter just graduated high school and went off to college.
Woo!
So, you know, as our empty nest moved, and because my daughter is she's been playing soccer since she was 4, now she's 18.
Wow.
We went to the Women's World Cup in New Zealand.
Wow.
Which was amazing. And of course, I got to ask my friends, Sean Astin and Elijah Wood, for suggestions about what to do in New Zealand. Because I think they've been there a couple times.
Right.
For a few hours. And it was a beautiful country. And just the vibe and the culture there, so sweet. I mean, has anybody ever been in a customs line and had someone come up and offer you candy? No, nobody do that in the U.S.
Yeah,
They just bring a dog and a gun by you.
Yeah. If anything, customs is going to take everything from you here. Well, that's great. I'm so glad you had that experience. You said you don't travel often, but is there any place you might want to vacation in the future? Any trips, you know, if you were to do one more in your lifetime, what would it be?
I don't know. I mean, I go to places for reasons. I go to conventions. So, you know, it's not just the place, it's the purpose.
What is one thing that you'll never do again in your lifetime? Any experiences where you're like, oh, that was a lot, I'll never be doing that again?
Well, you should ask the cops that. Never gonna get to do this again. There's one thing you never do well. I don't know, what am I too old or too short to do now? Well, I played basketball in 6th grade, so yeah, I'll never do that again.
One other question we have on our list today, that might be a fun one for you, but you're welcome to opt out of this if you don't want to. Do you have any celebrity impressions that you like to do?
Do I have any celebrity impressions?
Correct, sorry, we have a list of questions for today. If you don't want to do any of those, that's totally fine, but
Well, actually, the question would be, do you have any celebrity impressions you've been paid to do? Yes. I am Bail Organa. The rebellion needs your help. I mean, I've done a lot of impressions.
yeah.
But the ones, well, actually, there are a couple I won't get paid for after the Oscars. Hey, Uncle Phil! Uncle Phil, keep my aunt's name out your mouth.
That is not how we do it.
That's fantastic. Great, I will pull up some of the questions from the audience today.
Okay, great.
Great. First question, what is your favorite improv game? This is from Rook in the audience.
Oh, wow. That's, you know, the specific games. I don't think I have one specific, because to me, improv is like acting, and at its core, it's all the same. It's yes and. You know, if you do it in, you know, alphabet, you know, it's like, well, each line has to start with A, B, C, you know, that's just the game. You know, I'm trying to think if there are any specific, or that, gibberish, where you translate someone else. No, I love them all.
Yeah.
Yeah, improv is just such a huge part of my life. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. Jenny in the audience wants to know, what is your favorite book?
Well, that is a coin toss between Alice in Wonderland or The Phantom Tollbooth. The Phantom Tollbooth is more important to me because that book is the reason I'm an actor. Because in 8th grade, my school did a production of a play based on The Phantom Tollbooth, and I went and auditioned for it. Not because I did acting ever before, or wanted to be on stage and wanted people to look at me. It's because I loved that book so much that I wanted to play this, one of the little villain characters towards the end of the book, the senses taker. He will take your sense of purpose, your sense of honor, but he cannot fight your sense of humor. And I wanted to play that character.
Yeah.
But I auditioned and didn't get that part. I got cast as one of the leads instead. And that's why we're here.
Kim in the audience wants to know, did you fanboy anybody here? Were there any people this year where you were like, oh my gosh, I'm a fan of your work and haven't met you yet?
A bunch. I've fanboyed so many people. Gina Torres, who's incredible. I mean, just an amazing actress. But also, we were coworkers.
Gina was the voice of Vixen on Justice League Unlimited. Part of Jon Stewart's love triangle. You can't make a ring with a triangle on it.
I also really fanboyed out to True Valentino. Who is such, anybody watch him on The Rookie? Yeah. Isn't he fantastic? But also, True just joined the Groundlings, which is a theater group in Los Angeles, and where I also was a member. So now we have that in common. So I blocked his line for 20 minutes babbling about that.
Safira in the audience wants to know, what happens during your most memorable Halloween?
I don't know. Halloween is not that memorable for me because doing sketch comedy at the Groundlings and on Mad TV made me not dress up anymore. No, I don't put on costumes for free. My kid's like, Dad, why don't you put on, we're wearing costumes. So no, I don't have any very specific Halloween memories. Yeah, let's do that. They're gone. So many memories are leaking out of my ear.
Do you have like your kid's first Halloween?
Well, I think the first one was my son dressed up. Although one of my favorites is he and his buddy dressed up. Sorry, no, I lost it. There was a big song, the big pop song from the Korean pop star.
Gangnam Styles with the audience singing
Oh.
side with the
Oh.
dance.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, the Halloween my son dressed up like that guy.
Oh.
Danced, all around the neighborhood.
That's memorable for sure. That's
Yeah,
really
it
fun.
is.
Sir Chewy from the audience wants to know, what is the type of voice or character you would like to do if you had the ability to voice anything?
There is no voice that you just like to do because the voice is completely dependent on the character, the story, and the writer-creator's concept of what voice fits that character. Now, it's interesting because I think a lot of people have a misunderstanding about how characters are chosen or things are casted. Last year when Milestone Media came back, there was discussion of this. Maybe they were going to do a live-action Static Shock movie or series. We don't know what it is, but something. And all these people on the internet are like, I should be playing Static. It's like, dude, you got to read the script first, to know whether you can play it. It ain't just based on your hairstyle. Because that's the thing. It's like, is it a teenage Static who's dealing with heavy trauma? Or is it a noble, heroic teenage Static? Because any different story of that character will need a different actor to play that role. It's not just about what you think.
No, it's really getting into that deeper characterization that makes the voice sing as part of the project. Dave the Cuddle Fox on the Discord wants to know, what's your favorite candy or dessert?
Favorite candy? Butter toffee peanuts. That count as candy?
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah. Another question, how did COVID impact your recording process? And how do you feel about being an audio engineer in addition to a voice actor?
Okay, so you already know how it impacted, because we were not allowed to go into studios. We had to record film and be both the actor and the engineer in your closet. Although, and I don't think a lot of us have discussed this, but the one plus of the COVID virtual recording thing was years prior to COVID, more and more animated shows stopped doing group recording. In the old days, you always recorded together. When we did every episode of Static Shock, Justice League, Weekenders, everything that I started out doing, you were always with the other people, which was fantastic. When we're getting to do the first episode of Futurama, and I get to be in the room and watch Billy West do the voices of 3 characters all talking to each other. And like watching the show, you can't even tell that's the same human being. But it was incredible to share that, to share air with somebody like that.
Yes.
But for some reason, over the last few years, the animation shows were having you come in and record your lines alone. So you didn't get to perform a scene with your other actors. You just did one version of the line, and another version of the line, and another version of the line, and then somebody in editing spent 3 days cutting everybody's performances together. But when COVID hit, we started all getting together on Zoom again. So, you weren't sharing the air, but at least I got to hear the other actors' performances.
Right.
And as we all know, when someone says something to you, it affects what you say back. Because if somebody says it to you like this, then you answer like that. Not like this. So that has been the one positive of COVID is I got to see other voice actors perform again on my screen.
Not quite the same as the studio
No,
group, but
you don't get to go to lunch with people.
Dino DNA in the Discord is asking, what is the most obscure area that you've had to record in, like a hotel room or a closet, etc.? What's the most obscure and slapped together recording booth you've recorded lines in?
Nothing obscure.
Okay.
It's just in my booth at home. Although it's funny because there was a friend of mine when COVID hit, she's been a lifelong legendary voice actor. She said, "Oh God, now I've got to get a laptop." What? How have you been doing your auditions? Yeah, I just get in my Prius and do them on my phone. Wow. Okay. That's pretty obscure.
There's been a rise in podcasting, and I do know some people that podcast from their closets.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of become a a thing of sorts. Zosimus in the Discord is asking, what is your favorite memory from Dragoncon?
Well, I mean, I don't know. Every experience here is so fun. Although I'd probably say my favorite was that 2013? I can't remember, because I'm a big Battlestar Galactica fan. And I got to meet a bunch of the cast of that show and take pictures with them. So, you know, that's my best fanboy moment.
Yeah, that's awesome that you get the time to be a fan in addition. Another question, did you ever do casual Zoom meetups with other actors? You just talked about it, but did you ever have meetups outside of kind of collaborative work?
Oh, what do you mean?
I guess this question, you just talked about how you had the chance to work with people on Zoom again, but do you ever have meetups outside of projects with collaborators, just meet up and talk about the craft?
Not generally. I mean, generally you have your discussion about the project either before or after the record. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's been anything like that. Well, I mean, the closest thing to that is when COVID, regulations opened up and we went into hybrid mode or whatever. We were recording episodes of Futurama, and they could not fit everyone into, because they tried to make sure that everybody was 6 feet apart in the studio, so they could fit maybe half the cast in at one time. But I have a nice booth, so I would record virtually. But then, when they break for lunch, I'm like, all right, I'll drive over to the studio and meet you guys for lunch. So that's the closest thing to that
Yeah.
I've encountered.
Smoke in the Discord is asking, are there any new hobbies you picked up during COVID?
No new hobbies. I mean, actually, probably less hobbies. I've lost track of a lot of comic book stuff. I don't know if that has anything to do with COVID, but fortunately, my main hobby, playing rec league softball, is something you could still do because it was an outdoor hobby. So that didn't stop.
MC Ebony wants to know, what exercises do you do to help you get into character before recording?
Well, there are no exercises. Getting into character is the job. It's reading, getting as much information, and hopefully, if they have a drawing, taking that in. But also, that process is collaborative. It's so, I'll read the character and make my decision that to the creator, writer, producer, whatever, and then they will usually give you a note. Say, oh, that's great, but how about a little bit of this or a little bit of that? And so you just adjust until you come together, your choice and their choice meet. And then that is how a character is created. Well, that's how half the characters have created. The other half is when the animators bring it visually to life after the recording is done. A lot of movies give people the wrong idea. Like, you watch Robert Williams dubbing, thing in Mrs. Doubtfire. No. For American animation, the voice recording is done before the animation so that the timing of the character's mouth movement and body movement is established before the animators, and that way they don't have to change everything when an actor says something slower than you thought. Oh crap, now I gotta change his face. Yeah. Voice first, drawing later.
You mentioned comics earlier. There's actually a question from Sammy in the Discord asking, what comics do you personally read?
Well, I'm a big comic book fan from way back in the day. I have some Mad magazines that are older than me. But my favorite characters have always been Batman and Spider-Man. And it's been strange from my generation, because back in the day, comics were a fringe thing. You didn't even talk about it in high school. Where people would just look at you and walk away. But now, these characters, these worlds, are mainstream. Like, you know, the quarterback on your football team knows who Captain America is now. Wasn't the case in my generation. But also to be in the entertainment industry, and now to get to be part of the worlds of these characters. You know, I got to work with Batman. You know, both Batmans, Kevin Conroy and Adam West. And also I got to be just a tiny bit part, but I was in a Spider-Man movie. I got to carry Tobey Maguire. So, you know, one, just as an actor, those are good gigs, but as a fanboy, that was so cool. You know, I got to touch a spider suit.
Which scene was it?
In Spider-Man 2, there was the train fight between Doc Ock and Spider-Man. And there's a whole sequence where there's a bunch of people on the train who try to help Spider-Man, and he saves their train from, you know, crashing. And yes, I was an extra in that scene.
Brandon on the Discord wants to know what is your favorite work or piece of art outside of voiceover or animation?
Not, I mean, just something that someone else.
Yeah, I think any artistic medium.
Well, I don't know that I have any single favorite. Actually, you know, go to museums, and I just went in Los Angeles. They just had a, you know, Jean-Michel Basquiat exhibit, and I unfortunately had not been that familiar with his work. But as a comic book guy, I realized, how was I not? Because he drew so much of, you know, our nerdy kind of vibe into museum level fine art. So if anybody has not gone to a Basquiat exhibit, you know, or even checked it out online or whatever, do it. Do it, because it's amazing on a number of levels. So yeah, that's certainly my, you know, current thing.
Another question from the Discord. What character do you relate to the most?
I don't know. I mean, relate to? I don't know. There are a few that I feel like sound like me, but they aren't like me, you know? The Earth King is basically just my own voice, but I'm not the king of any, you know, anything. And I certainly feel that, you know, Virgil Hawkins in Static was pretty much how I sounded when I was 14.
I mean, I didn't have no electrical powers. But, you know, if I did, maybe I would be like him. You know, I'd fight for what's right, but also try to get my homework done.
So yeah, I think Virgil is probably the one I relate to the most. Because he's, and that has less to do with what I feel personally, as much as it has to do with the quality of the writing and the storytelling. They made that character so real. And I don't know how old any of y'all are, but you know, back in 2000 on Saturday morning cartoons, there was nothing else that felt like your life, you know, except that show.
Similar question. This one's from Elijah. What has been your most fulfilling role and why? Was it that role or a different role?
Well, that's tough. And not tough, actually. It's a wonderful, fortune to me that, am I supposed to pick the Green Lantern or the Jedi or the show I got to work 24 years with Matt Groening? I've been so lucky to have so many like once in a career kind of experiences. I've had more than one. Yeah, perhaps this summertime, you know? Although that was not something tied to, you know, like the DC stuff from my past. It was a completely new world that I didn't realize. And then to be a part of that, something that a genius like Indy Tartakovsky began, that definitely feels so important. It's like, wow, you know? So, yeah, hard to pick one.
But that's a great problem to have if you
Yeah.
have so much fulfilling
Yes,
work.
it's good luck.
Rook from the Discord is asking, have you checked out the Atlanta food scene yet? We're about to have our first set of Michelin stars, and it's up and coming here.
Oh, no, I mean, where did I go? Tiny Lou's? For dinner? Yeah, I don't know. I only go to someplace really cool, you know, high level, you know, 5-star food restaurant when I'm hanging out with Ming Chen. Because he's a foodie, me, I'm just trying to fill my belly.
Here's a great question. What kind of power do you believe animation has to influence and teach children?
I don't know that animation, honestly, in my experience, it is less about the effect of something, the impact of something is less about the medium than the quality. You know, when something is incredibly well made and you watch it as a child, it impacts you. Although, you know, those of us who are older show some stuff to our kids that we loved, and they're like, oh, it wasn't that good. But the things that are good, that you loved as a kid, you show to your kid, you know, when they're grown, or, you know, when you get older, and they respond to it as well as you did. But that doesn't have to do with the fact that it's just a drawn cartoon or a Saturday morning live action show. It has to do with the quality, you know, the things that made you feel great when you watch them, you know, like Scooby-Doo or whatever. Your kids will respond to it now, you know. So it's about the geniuses behind it, you know, and what they bring to life, not just, you know, although it's funny because, you know, for us older people, adults didn't watch cartoons. But now we realize cartoon is an art form. You can watch it at any age, right? You know, you don't have to walk out of the room when your kid turns on a cartoon anymore. Not like in the old days. Like, you still watching that stuff? All right, finish your cereal. Tell me when the golf comes on.
There's a question here about how you first got into voice work or how you first got involved. It's asking about like introductory networking or part of it, what was the inspiration of getting into voice work?
Actually, this is an odd answer because there are two answers. I, you know, made the decision to pursue voice acting in the, you know, mid-late 90s after I moved back home to LA after college and began pursuing an acting career and had been doing improv and sketch comedy with the Groundlings. That led me into doing sketch comedy on Mad TV. And on Mad TV, because it was based on Mad Magazine, we had some animated little interstitial stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't really, you know, a focus. We weren't voice cast. It's like, producers were like, well, we're already paying the actors for these episodes. Just have them voice the cartoons. But after a couple of years of that, I thought, you know what, maybe I should look into the cartoon voice stuff, and made a decision to actively pursue it and got really lucky because the casting company that cast Mad TV got hired to cast the new Matt Groening show in 1998. So that was a nice big step up. The way to start, you know. That's like being a rookie baseball player and it's like, okay, your first game is World Series game number 1. Come on. But the second answer to that question is my first professional paid acting job, the job that got me my union card, was my junior year of high school. And it was on a cartoon. And that was thanks to a family friend who actually is now an Atlanta resident. A woman named Phyllis Tucker Vinson, who was the head of children's programming for NBC back in the 80s. She is the woman who introduced the Smurfs to the United States and was for 2 decades the highest ranking African American woman in television history. From the 80s up until 2016 when
Oprah?
Channing Dungey became head of ABC. No other black woman had as much power as this woman, Phyllis. And she was friends with our family and knew I did plays and got me an audition in junior year of high school for a cartoon where they were using real kids for kids' voices, which back in the 80s wasn't very often. And so I auditioned and got cast as Woody Daniels on the Mr. T cartoon.
Oh, wow.
So that is how I started voice acting, but didn't really realize it.
This question is from Dan. You're known for your voice work, but how do you prepare for live action roles?
Well, the job is the same. It is taking the script, the concept of the character, embodying the character, and bringing it to life, you know? Although the big difference is, with animation, you don't have to memorize it, because you're reading it. But that's also the challenge, because I don't know if any of you have had to, read something out loud in front of people, but there's some weird thing about human brains. When you are reading words off a page, you flatten out. You don't have any sort of feeling. You are just looking at letters and putting them out of your mouth. So the trick of reading words off a page and giving it feeling and, not just making it sound like you're reading, that's the biggest trick of the animation part. In some ways, the live action stuff is easier because you get to rehearse, you get to memorize, and then you get to put on a costume and a makeup. So you can feel the character, on your body, not just in your head.
Right.
But you got to do the work in your head as well.
And the solo recording work is not optional for live action. You know you're going to get another actor to talk about. Thank you.
Oh my God, I know. That would be weird if somebody decided during COVID to just yeah, I'm going to shoot a movie virtually. Hey, Ron, can you just shoot your close-ups at home on your phone and then send us the lines?
Isn't that like half
Wouldn't that have
of Marvel?
sucked? Wow, movies are so terrible now. But they didn't do that. Right? Right? Although, during the big part of COVID, you had less and less movies with big extra scenes. No, we can't have 100 people in the room. If one of them sneezes, we gotta shut down production.
There was a question on how you got involved with Twisted Tunes.
Well, Twisted Tunes is organized by Jeff Zanini, the head of celebrity talent booking, who is, a convention rep for a lot of voice actors. And I think he just came up with the idea. It's like, oh my God, I've got all these great voice actors. Maybe we can do something, other than just sit there and sign our names. And so came up with the idea of a great fun performance. I don't know, how many people got to see either of the Twisted Tune performances? Yeah. So, I mean, it's so much fun to, you know, bring to life a classic movie, but filter it through these iconic voices. You know, I mean, they were one of the first ones we did. I remember sitting next to Jim Cummings, and we were reading a Star Wars script, and he did Darth Vader lines in the Winnie the Pooh voice. I find your lack of faith disturbing. I'm like, I want to see that on screen.
That's such a fun project. Brandon is asking, do you ever still get nervous when you go on set?
Do you ever still get nervous? Yes. You know, you can always have some level of question or doubt. Although, you know, certainly at this age, most questions are answered in your head before you get to set. But, you know, if it's like if you've got to be in water or something, you know, it's like, oh, it's a boat scene. I think that can make you worry or wonder. But in general, no. No, don't really get nervous.
And there was a question about when you're reading from a script, how do you make the voice sound more dynamic and less flat, as you mentioned?
Again, it comes down to what the creator is handing you in terms of the material. What is the description? Because, you know, you can have a scene where a character is just interacting with somebody in high school, but then you look at the description of the character. And, oh, this coach at the high school is kind of arrogant.
So you don't just give him a regular coach voice just because I'm a big guy who plays ball. If he's got this sense of arrogance to him, all right, kids, get in here. You got to warm up, stretch.
You know, you add the elements that the creator tells you he needs. That's how you make it. And as long as it's not badly written, it's like, what's this character? You know, he's just a guard. What's he like? Then it gets a little flat. But actually then you can make a decision. It's like, well, no, I'm gonna base the character on something in my head. You know, that time I played a guard on an NYPD Blue episode. Hey, come on, you guys get in here. You know, and see if they like it. But usually they won't say, no, make it flatter.
So some sort of strong decision about personality for that character.
Yeah, you always make a choice.
There was a question about what was the most difficult role you voiced and why?
Well, I mean, there are some voices that are in places in your throat that can be, you know, a little physically challenging, but the level of difficulty isn't usually about that. Actually, I would say the most difficult role I had was it was in a Terminator video game, and it was just some little background guy, not even, you know, really a choice about a character, but it was 9 in the morning, and if you're a character in a Terminator game, you get killed a lot. So having to do that many death screams first thing in the morning really just sort of wrecked my throat. You know, like, okay, now you're getting shot with a shotgun. Ah! All right, now you're being electrocuted. And then the Terminator throws you off a building. Ah! And now you're getting cut in half with a chainsaw. Oh, God. That was tough.
There's a question from Sammy in the audience. She's asking, is there any character from a comic book who's never been animated before that you'd love to voice?
That's an interesting question. I mean, most of my classic characters, you know, that I, you know, was really into reading have been animated. You know, Batman, Spider-Man, Wolverine. I mean, and, you know, it's wild to know the guys that voice these characters in such a way, you know, like whenever I read a Wolverine comic, I hear Steve Blum's voice, you know, and Kevin Conroy is bad. I thought Kevin, you know, Kevin should have been dubbing in Batman in the live action movies.
Right.
You know, Christian Bale would have won an Oscar if Kevin's voice came out of his mouth. But I mean, there's no specific other character that I can think of. Because again, it comes down to the script
Yeah.
and the story.
This question is from Old School Geek in the Discord. Great Discord handle. As an actor, what is the best piece of advice that someone else has given you? And then what is the best piece of advice you figured out for yourself?
Best piece of advice someone's given me. Actually, coming up in Hollywood, you don't get a lot of good advice. You get a lot of bad advice. You sign with an agent and they say, why don't you change that? Your hair, your name, your nose, you know what? And also, a lot of times the advice someone is offering you when you're starting a career in show business is they're trying to sell you a book or their workshop class or whatever. So it's not really specifically about you. And the thing that I've learned over the years is what makes you move forward is your uniqueness. But most Hollywood advice pushes against that. It's like, here's what everybody's got to do. Here's what you should do. No, what I should do is what is best for me. What puts my weaknesses aside and puts my strengths forward. What I think I might have said this already earlier, what I learned is that, you know, back in the day, there were walls between the different kinds of performances, whether it was comedy on camera, drama on camera, comedy or drama on stage, or on microphone for animation. And all of those things were considered separate. You know, you couldn't, if you were a commercial actor, you couldn't get cast in a drama. You know, or if you were a comedy actor, same thing. No, you do that, you do that, you do that. But over time, I've learned, and I think we're moving more toward that as a culture, people are understanding, it's like, no, it's not just one thing. Bringing a character to life for an audience is the job. Whether it's a commercial, whether it's a play, or whether it's a movie. That is what you are doing. And that's the same skill set. But the technical differences are whether you do it into a microphone, a camera, or to a group. That does make you have to change a little bit. But at its heart, you're doing the same work.
There was another question about Twisted Tunes, and they first complimented you for your work in it. And then they asked, is there a character mashup and voice that you would find hilarious? Like a random pairing that you've thought about for it?
Oh, well, like I said, that Winnie the Pooh, Darth Vader, you know. And that's the thing that's the most fun about Twisted Tunes is when you take something that's, you know, lives in your head over here and connect it to something that lives in your head over there, like Darth Vader and Winnie the Pooh, you know. But those are pretty random, you know.
Yeah.
Sometimes we just mix things up and they land like that. And other times it's just funny to hear that wacky voice, you know.
What other actor do you feel like you have the best chemistry with? Or is there a voice actor you've worked with that you always know you're going to have a good pairing with?
Well, actually, the voiceover world is the nicest corner of show business. So everybody I've worked with, you know, either recently or for 20 years, are people I would, you know, take a dinner reservation with at any time, you know, because they're all so talented, but also so cool, so great, you know. I mean, you know, Gray Delisle and Jason Marsden, who were both guests here, we've gotten to work on hundreds of episodes on several shows, you know, Weekenders, Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, Static Shock, you know, so many, you know, things, and all of those were wonderful experiences.
Within voice acting work, is there any emotion that's easier to convey, or are there more difficult emotions relatively?
Well, I mean, I suppose anger is probably the easiest to convey, just because we all know how anger sounds. What do you mean? You know, so that's a less tricky one. You know, we get to something more subtle. It's like, okay, this character's really anxious. Okay, how does this guy sound when he's anxious? Does he, well, maybe he just slows down his voice a little. You have to make a choice.
Yeah.
And the director, you know, helps you. You know, if you put something, I remember one of my very first voiceover gigs, I've been doing the on-camera work. I did a line, and they said, "Okay, that's great, that's great. Can you give it to us, you know, a little angrier?" And I did the line again, and they said, "Phil, hold on a second. We're gonna play that back for you." And they played both takes back, and I realized they sounded exactly the same. I had just made an angrier face. And how your face looked doesn't necessarily change how your voice sounds. So that was a class that I learned something new.
There was a question here about audio equipment. Do you have like a favorite mic or recommendations for a home setup for someone who's getting started?
No, it's funny. Everyone keeps asking, do you have a favorite? Do you have a favorite? And my answer is always no. I don't have a favorite character. I don't have a favorite mic. But advice-wise, for if you're recording, you know, at home or something, the difference between at home and recording studios, you have less control of the environment. Do not buy an $8,000 mic. It will pick up every weak sound, and it will hear your dog's feet going by outside. You know, so, I mean, if you have, you know, a super famous, fancy recording studio, then you want that $8,000 mic, because it captures every element, every vibe of the voice. But for a home studio, don't overdo yourself. Just get enough to capture your performance. That's what you're trying to do.
There was a question about your improv group, the Black version. How did you cultivate an audience for that group initially?
I'm sure a lot of people don't know about this. There is a group we have in Los Angeles that is an improv comedy monthly show at the Groundlings Theater called The Black Version. And it's a group of all black actors, and actually it's been a pretty amazing group. Originally it was me, Jordan Black, the creator of the show, Gary Anthony Williams, Cedric Yarbrough, Keegan-Michael Key, Jordan Peele, Danielle Gaither, who's also on Mad TV, me, and Naima Funk, who's a Second City alum. And sometimes we even have other guests come in, Wayne Brady, Maya Rudolph, you know. And what we do is we take a suggestion from the audience of a classic or iconic Hollywood movie and then improv the black version of it. You know, it's a lot of fun. But initially, it was a little more controversial because, and I mean, we started this 13 years ago, but now, you know, since we've, you know, as this country has been moving forward better in diversity and representation, like back then, when you yelled out a classic Hollywood movie, there wasn't no black people in it. You know, so okay, yeah, we'll do the black version of Jaws, Catfish. You know, for the time, I remember was doing the show with us one time, and they yelled out, "Grease!" And our version was Sulfa 8. And it was amazing. But, now, I mean, every once in a while, even back then, you'd have somebody yell out, "New Jack City!" No. The black version of that already exists. But it's a lot of fun. Although, basically, sometimes what we're doing is laying stereotypes over these iconic movie scenes. Like when we did Rocky IV, it was Pookie Fo. And he was, a wrestler, not a boxer. But it's a lot of fun. And it, as always, a great, I think the audience came because, maybe because of who we had in the cast, and because it was an improv show at the Groundlings, which, for 40 plus years has been, a home for that. So people came just to see the improv, not specifically about what movie it was going to be. But now we've established, since we've been doing it so long, we've established a big enough audience that we've actually taken the show on tour. We played at a midnight theater, a place called Midnight Theater in New York City earlier this year, and we've played at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. twice now.
From the whole world.
So, and one of our cast members, Gary Anthony Williams, is an Atlanta man, so hopefully we'll get here someday soon.
A similar follow-up question. This is from...
All these super long answers I give him, we still have time for another question?
I know. There's just a couple more minutes. This is from Rook in the audience, and he says, as a fellow black improviser, do you have any tips on how to avoid drawing too much on stereotypes and pushing through your authentic self more?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because improv is, you're always drawn halfway from your head, but the other half is from the suggestion, So you're collaborating, building together, collaborating with the audience. So it's not just about you, Like if they give you a character name, you don't just ignore that and just treat the character like I would play it on camera. No, you gotta bring the suggestion into the character and bring that to life for it. And the thing about stereotypes, that's a choice. Because in comedy, sometimes a stereotype choice is funny. What do you mean? But sometimes it's not appropriate, and that's what, as an improviser, working that instant choice commitment thing into your muscle memory, you don't have to think about it. You just do it, So that, work it enough that you're not stopping and going, wait, what did they just say? What did they do? You don't want to be doing that. Jump on it, commit to it, go 100%. And your scene partners will throw their thing in, and that will add to whatever you're doing as well.
There was a question here I like. It's more of a get-to-know-you question, but it's kind of fun. What makes you the happiest, or when are you the most happy?
When the Dodgers win. And when I get to meet comic book geniuses. I have a sketchbook that has sketches of, I said Batman is my favorite iconic character. So weirdly, most of the time when someone says, oh, hey, Phil, sure, I'll give you a sketch in your sketchbook. What do you want me to draw? I'm like, could you draw me a Batman? And so I have a Batman drawn by Bill Sienkiewicz, John Byrne.
Ooh.
Like, you didn't have John Byrne do Wolverine? But I have those drawings. And that makes me so happy, because it's like, I'm living in a comic book. Although the funny thing was, because I had this sketchbook, sometimes I go up to comic book writers and they're like, why are you handing me a sketchbook? Like, oh, no, you can just sign it for me. I just love meeting you. And I met Garth Ennis one time at San Diego Comic-Con. And I said that, and he's like, no, it's a sketchbook. And he did a sketch! So I have writer sketches too.
Oh, wow.
Was it
That makes me
good?
happy.
Yeah, and I'm sure this audience relates to that. Finding someone else in a craft that you have passion for, that brings you joy, feels so good. And that's what this, this convention and this community is all about.
Yeah. That's why we're here.
Woo!
Great, we just have a few minutes left, and I'd like to ask at the end, are there any charitable organizations or organizations you partner with that you want to plug or give a shout out to?
Oh, yes. Actually, there are two in particular. One is a foundation called empowerher.org, which is an organization that is focused mainly on introducing young women of color to more opportunities and options, because a lot of the time they're not given that growing up. It's like, no, you can do that, it's all about limitation. But empowerher.org says, no, they bring mentors into these high school classes, and they offer, opportunities, and so it opens up the possibilities for people's lives. And this is a foundation that my mother, Betty LaMarr, founded about 10 years ago. Another charitable organization that I have a nice connection to is a pediatric cancer charity called St. Baldrick's. My son, well, actually our family had a friend who lost her 6-year-old son to cancer, many years, 15 years ago. And my son was friends of his, and so at 8, to honor his friend who he lost, he became a part of this thing that St. Baldrick's does, where every year on St. Patrick's Day, they have people take sponsorships, and then they have their heads shaved, to join the kids who are, undergoing chemotherapy and having to lose their hair. So now there are more bald kids, so they feel more normal. But also, the kids who get their head shaved get sponsored by people, and that money goes toward pediatric cancer charities. And St. Baldrick's was one of the charities that was benefited by an event I attended a couple of years ago, where it was the first time they did it. Now I think they're doing it every year. Something called Voices Against Cancer in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. They got a bunch of voice actors and some on-camera actors as well, although Giancarlo Esposito does voice and on-camera, everything. Frank Welker was there, Peter Cullen, just an incredible amount of people. And we did a day of signing, and all of the funds from that went toward pediatric cancer charities. So those are two wonderful charitable organizations.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing those to our attention. And thank you for answering our questions and being with us today. That's our time for today.
Of course. Thank you all so much for being here. I figured a panel on a Monday, there'd be 3 people.